As far back as I can remember, I'm always taken into my dreams by a big white horse. I follow it with my eyes and I go in, and it was grey all around me, and then all of a sudden I found myself in a pipe ceremony. Ken Goodwill was doing the pipe ceremony. I was watching the smoke come out of the pipe, and the smoke came towards me, and as it got towards me, it started getting bigger and bigger, and the smoke lifted me up and took me somewhere.
Whether you call this traditional knowledge or traditional approaches, all these are valid in their own right. They're a product of a valid human experience, and they do not need to be validated by Western science or any other system. And it's important that you remember this, because there are things that First Nations people believe and experience that is difficult for non-First Nations people who do not have the knowledge or experiential base to be able to process that information.
The type of research that I've been involved with now, is so different because it's our research. It's us researching ourselves.
I believe research can be a change agent, but it has to be done the right way, with the right people, with the guidance of elders, with community members directing it and guiding it.
For researchers, we have to always be questioning ourselves. Who am I? Why am I doing this? And who am I in the relationship to the people I'm working with?
Back. That community will give to me what they feel they want or they feel they need inside. And I feel that's really important, because a lot of times we are going out and researching specific pieces of information, but that community may not feel it's really relevant to themselves.
I'm not merely collecting information for the sake of collecting information according to the Western system. My primary viewpoint always has to be that I am doing research in order to benefit my community and the people that I'm going to be working with.
I think it captures what at least our goals are, which is collaboration between educators, researchers, and community partners. And we want education and action as outcomes of social change. Developing services is the ultimate goal.
One of the goals was to increase or build upon representative workforce in the health system and promote cultural awareness to those non-Aboriginal people working within the health system, and to also build capacity within that system for people of Aboriginal background to enter into health professions.
What we found is that for many healthcare professionals, the personal prejudices that they held, many of which they might not have been aware were interfering with their duties in law and professional regulation. And so there's this significant dissonance for people, and they may not even recognize that they've have this duty, and yet it's a duty that they're only fully discharging for some people, not all the citizens that they're charged with serving.
As a non-Aboriginal researcher, as a person of privilege, when I face some of these, or I become aware of the oppression and the power of politics, it can come as a surprise, maybe. But I think to Aboriginal researchers, it's not a surprise. They live with it, so they bring that position of always having to fight, for recognition. So I would say it's probably not a surprise to them. We're here together, and we'll work together to change the structures, I think. So really, you're not just producing a piece of information for a journal. You're trying to change institutions of power.
We do understand, but we need to be careful not to overgeneralize, is that for many people the last time that they were in an institutional environment is very likely when they were in residential school. And so we should at least start with the assumption that there might be some considerable fear or other kinds of issues associated with any kind of an institutional experience or interface.
When it is your health that is at stake, your beliefs are it's critical, what you believe and the way you seek information and the way you seek care and what you are expecting from the health system. It may vary and it has an impact in your outcome.
I also wanted to preserve the traditional knowledge in the area of health. And that was one of the things that I wanted to do.
A couple of the individuals of our elders shared some of those stories and said, this is my time to share this, and I want to share this because I want this to be here when I move on.
And I thought I saw a big buffalo stand up. You know how buffalo shake their head side to side? I saw it doing that, and I started waving my arms frantically, trying to go backwards because I thought I was going to land in front of the buffalo. When I landed, I didn't see a buffalo. I looked around, and there was a little boy, and he was standing in a pond of water, and it was his hair blowing in the wind, and I thought, well, that must have been what I saw, and thought it was a buffalo. And he was holding his little pants up because he was standing in this little pond of water. When I was younger, I was put in a convent, and they used to, every year they would come and measure our heads. And I always thought, I was waiting for them to give me my hat now, you know, because that's what I thought you get your head measured for. But the hat never came. So, and I was never told either, and neither were our parents, of why our heads were measured.
Historically speaking, research is viewed by many Aboriginal communities as really a dirty word, just because of past experience where people have gone in to research them, collected the data, and they've moved out, and that was it. Really the opposite of what any sort of participatory action model entails.
The attitude of helicopter research, when researchers used to come into communities and they do their research and they leave and we never get the results. And it's like, well, whatever happened with all that? We took a lot of time. We took our time is valuable. We shared that information, but we never got the results, and how come? So what researchers or what academic settings or what our outside partners need to be able to give up some control. They need to give up some power, then they need to give up money. They still have decision-making. But they have to really be willing to give up those.
If we as researchers go to their community and they are not giving us some piece of information, the fact that if we are not getting that information, it's not because they don't want to give you that, because they don't trust you, but just because you may not be able to understand the meaning the way they have it.
You always have that vision of being that, white knight shining in to, to help, right? And it's very simplistic, and I realize that. But that whole idea that we know what our needs are as a community, but being very clear on what they're willing to share and not share.
I think if we as researchers had gone in there, even if we were invited by the community, if we had gone in there and were invited to participate in a research project without knowing the community first, then there would have been a lot of time, a tremendous amount of time, perhaps years before we were in a position where we were really going to do good research. And unfortunately, most granting agencies don't account for that relationship building. And so coming to know the community in this other way before actually doing the research was very, very valuable.
This whole movement towards evidence-based, and what does evidence-based mean? Normally it means objectivity, something that's proven in literature and that is supported by random controlled experimentation, those sorts of things, and very much the complete polar opposite of what research should be when you're concerning Aboriginal communities, where it's very much subjective and very much experiential.
I kind of self-appointed myself as the gatekeeper because I knew there were certain types of knowledge that was not going to be applicable to put out into this written document. But yet nobody within my community said, oh, you can't do this, don't put this, don't put that in there, right? Because they were so open with the information that they were sharing with me. So some of the ways that I protected that information was they would share that these traditional medicines were used for this purpose and that purpose and that purpose. And I think one of my gifts is because I still speak the traditional language, I said, okay, I'm not going to translate the names of these traditional medicines. So in my dissertation, it's actually the Cree word for the medicine that's in there. And I stayed right at the very beginning, I am not going to translate, so don't even bother asking me what these medicines are, because I'm not going to tell you what they are, and that's part of the way that I protected that knowledge.
One of the biggest challenges for me dealing with the bureaucracy is that this kind of research does not happen quickly. And so we're continually struggling, I guess, to predict deliverables and within sort of funding cycles and this kind of thing in a process that's very organic and fluid.
I've discovered that because in just working with Aboriginal students at the University of Regina, it was quite clear to me that their approach to learning was different from the approach to learning that non-Aboriginal students had. And it was also quite clear to me that they were trying to walk in the two communities at the same time to be able to get their degree at the university, but also to represent their community in the work that they were doing in the university.
Even though I still have one foot in the world of academia and it's publish, right? And I'm saying, no, I'm not going to publish my findings until I report back to the communities. And because I'm still waiting for these syllabic translations, it's 2 years later and I still haven't reported back to my communities.
The healthcare professionals really want to learn about traditions and how to help people, patients and families, how to provide better care in the hospital. But as you all know, like right now, healthcare is so stretched that they don't even have the time to come to take in the videos and the presentations that we want to offer.
Certainly the process is completely different from the Western paradigm and everything we learn in university to do, how to do research. So working with communities, working with Aboriginal communities is pretty much the opposite of everything that we learn. All of the things that we have to go through in the university are almost barriers, to doing that research. So I find that for me in my position, I would say what I do is try and take some of those barriers on and work them through, so that the communities and Aboriginal peoples don't have to continually face that discrimination and those barriers.
It's not the kind of work that gives you a real fast turnaround for career building. And the real benefit of being an old professor who doesn't need to care anymore about building your career means that you can do work that you think is important. And it doesn't really matter whether it translates into lots of publications right off the bat.
We're measured on the basis of our single-authored, first-authored, peer-reviewed work. And I think that may be changing a little bit. But honestly, if you're thinking about a new academic, which is essentially what I am on the tenure track, I don't have tenure, and I still need to go for promotion and all of that. There are certainly pressures on that end to show performance in ways that don't match my relationship with communities, which to me is more important. But it's in a sense, it's walking in an academic world that doesn't fit with the walk that is respectful with my Aboriginal partners.
I think we have a responsibility as researchers to inform the people that we work with, the leaders in our own academic arenas about this other way of doing research through presentations, rounds, having coffee with them, presenting the information to graduate students, volunteering to, to do workshops, because if we don't do this, it's not going to happen. We have to do this bit by bit. We have to get people to understand, and eventually there will be this critical mass of people who then in our faculty say, oh yeah, there is this other way of doing research, and it is valid, and it does make sense. And perhaps it will help us to address these questions that we haven't been able to address in other ways. And then there'll be a complete shift, a paradigm shift that, similar to what Thomas Kuhn has described, where now we say, oh yeah, okay, aha, this all does make sense. There are other ways of doing this. And it's okay for us to move into this other arena.
We as researchers who value a different way of knowing have to give more thought to how we can articulate the products of what we do. So, I mean, a typical CV, you will list your publications. Anybody that can count them. But when our products are videotapes, for example, or our products are going back to the community and sharing with them in some other meaningful way, that kind of dissemination, I think, needs to get captured. And we have to do that work because the committees aren't going to do the work.
A lot of times they don't recognize teams. So you want to put forth an application that honors everybody equally, and they don't want to do that. They want one investigator, principal investigator, and so some of these terms are inappropriate for the work that we do.
This is kind of research I'm in, and Mary already had a team with elders and community members, and that really impressed me because up until that point, I really had been a token on many of the committees I was on, research teams, and they didn't want to work with the community. They would see me as the community, which was completely inappropriate. Our philosophies are that we are a community of equals, and so nobody's higher or lower. We don't have this ranking or pecking order. And so when you're on a team, it should be a team effort.
Then he went to the side of the pond, and there was red willow growing, and he broke off a little stick, and he come out of the water, and he faced the east, and he lifted that stick up, and an eagle came, and it put something on the stick. I was thinking it was food, and the little boy went over to the magpies, and he gave the magpies the stick. He held out the stick, and the magpies were silent. There was no sound. He held that little stick out to them, and they ate off that stick, and then they started talking. They started talking in their magpie language, and he started talking the same thing back to them. And he laughed as he was talking to them.
The methodology, I had trouble finding one because my brain was still firmly ensconced in the quantitative world, right? So I wanted a step-by-step process. How do I do this? And just trying to make the brain switch into qualitative, which, you just kind of have to find something that's familiar, right? And once again, my committee was extremely supportive because I said, okay, well, I'm trying to figure out how to do the methodology. Like, can you give me some suggestions? Oh, just make it up as you go along. I'm going, pardon? Well, you'll find your path as you go along. Okay, so off I go again, looking at all these different methodologies. So the one that I finally, and those of you that kind of know the qualitative world, right, the one that I thought was most closely related was grounded theory. Yes, grounded theory, right? There's a way to do it, step-by-step process. And then narrative inquiry came along, and it was like, doing, that's it. This is it. This is the one that fits most with the way that I knew, right? The way that I had learned as a child. And just the knowledge of stories, the teaching and the learning through stories, that was what resonated within me.
I don't actually go into the communities myself and collect data. I believe that it's much, much better to have someone who is Aboriginal and ideally someone local to that community to participate for all kinds of reasons that we've already talked about today. So I have an Aboriginal research coordinator. We consult extensively with our community partners, and we have an advisory committee with Aboriginal people on it who have advised us methodologically right from the beginning. And then Holly goes into the communities herself and has done on a regular basis over the last 3 years. So she's well known in the communities and trusted in the communities, and collects the data. And at one point when we were wanting to do more extensive surveys that would involve individual interviews, we actually hired 2 local First Nations people, one in the Kenora area and one in the Fort Frances area, to do the interviews for us, because even Holly felt it would take someone more accepted in the community for people to feel comfortable.
Everyone comes with their information, or their knowledge, their background, their experience. So everybody has a wealth of experience. So to me, it's like, okay, I have what I've learned and I can share with you, but you have what you've learned and you can share with me. So to me, it's always an equal relationship. So it's never like, okay, I'm going to help you with anything. We are equal in this. And so we just go forward and do what we do best.
I think it's important for researchers to be aware of all of the different approaches to research. We each come from our own academic area of study, so whether it's the health sciences or social sciences or whatever it might be, and there's a dominant research paradigm that's usually taught within each of these areas. But it's really important to be aware of all of the different approaches to research, and I think realizing that the research is that much richer if we can move beyond our own silos and connect with other researchers in other areas. And the best way for us to be able to do that is to be aware of these different approaches to research.
We live in a society, whether we like it or not, that we need to document things. And even if we want to advocate for change, and if we want to say that the kind of services that First Nations people are receiving around palliative care, these are not appropriate for whatever reason, unless we can document why, substantiate that. So I believe research is important to achieve the goals that communities have for themselves. But it has to be documented by somebody.
The little boy ran a little ways and he lifted the stick up. And again, the eagle came to the stick. And this time, this beautiful blue horse ran by. And the little boy went to Prairie Dog and he held out that stick to them and they were eating off it. And he talked to them and they talked to him in their little song, the little voices they make. And he made the same little sound back.
To start out by listening. As you know, in the university, many of us are really are socialized to basically state our views and not request the views of other people. This is especially problematic with respect to students because we are meant to be, the university, our university world socializes us to be the expert, a concept that I have always fought against. But when you're socialized to be an expert, it's very difficult for you to basically ask questions of people and listen to what they have to say, as opposed to asking questions and just picking up when they say what you want them to say. So for me, it's very important for people who want to work with Aboriginal people in Aboriginal communities is to listen to what Aboriginal people are saying.
The inner experience, I guess, for me is whenever I'm even in research or approaching something new, it's always a new beginning for me. I don't assume that I have necessarily the experience or knowledge to engage, even if if it's with the same people but a new topic, that